One things I love about this podcast is just all the learning that happens and the feedback from the audience. And I really strive to get really credible, reputable people on where in today's, I think, where we really need a lot of that. And so today we have Dr. Mimi Vega. We're going to go Dr. Mimi today, who is just wonderful. With all the guests, I always get a chance to speak with them ahead of time just to get to know them, and such a quality person. And today we're going to talk all about the skin, a deep dive under the surface about the skin and maybe a different direction than maybe you think it's going to go here. But I don't profess to do these big introductions about my guests because they can talk much better about themselves than I can. So Dr. Mimi, please tell everyone a little bit about yourself and the work you're into, and then we'll just jump into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Derry, and thanks for the introduction. I'm not sure I can do a better job, but certainly provide more context. I like to say we're going to go skin deep, but it's much, much deeper than the skin. Absolutely. The skin connects to everything. This is what I realized throughout my career, my learning journey, my life, basically. I started off very, very early being so curious about nature, the world, our body, and specifically our skin, because as a teenager, I had a few issues, tried to resolve, became a chemist because of it, and did a deep dive into the world of the I'm not going to say microbiome yet, microbiology, because at the time, the microbiome we knew very little about. But ended up working on microorganisms in the lab, extracting their enzymes and making more connections, because the understanding of it and what I came to develop slowly over time, my perspective on the skin science 3.0 that I call the three barrier ecosystem, that took many connections through my oncology experience, through my immunology experience, working in biopharma, connecting organs and connecting pathways that would influence ultimately our well-being, our wellness, our health overall. And the skin, this fabulous organ that I've always been very passionate about, tells us so many things when we learn to listen to it. Because oftentimes there's signs on our skin that are actually just symptoms that are there to tell us, they're, as a diagnostics tool almost,
Right.
to what's going on in our body, but evidently also on our skin. But sometimes it's the body, sometimes it's the skin. So
Yeah.
it's been a journey, and hopefully I can bring you along with me and to explain all of that within the next few minutes.
Yes, most definitely. So speaking of telling us stuff, when we discussed, I always tell people, and people know on this podcast, we level set from the beginning. We operationalize things because I don't like to assume that everyone knows exactly what the structure, function, physiology is of the things we're discussing. We often just kind of jump to the big conclusions of things. In this case, let's talk about sunscreen and let's talk about cancer and skin cancer. We can get to all that, but let's first go backwards and talk about what is the skin? What's the structure of it? What's the function? Whole deal. Kick us off.
All right. I love that. I love that because it's true. We do skip a few steps when we start talking about the skin, especially the skin, because, it's the biggest organ. We've had it all our life. We've been told so many things about it. We think we know how it works, right?
That's right.
And, there's this structure, which is the three layer that we really know. So the first layer, the epidermis, it's the basis where the circulation goes through. We don't know much about it, but we know it's deep down there. Then there's the dermis, where the machinery happens. Where the sebum is produced, where we sweat, where the glands are located, and then there's the top layer, the physical layer, That is about the epidermis, where the corneocytes on top are the cells that, like the cell turnover. That's what we talk about. So people kind of know there's like 3 layers. And when I talk about Skin Science 3.0, that's what they think I refer to, the 3 layers of the physical structure of how the skin is built. But on top and working on top of that skin, there's also elements, what I call the 3 barriers of the skin, that are molecules that work with our skin. So first, to answer your kind of basic question, which is never basic because the skin is so complex, there are 3 physical layer structure, and the top layer is the one that we speak of most often, and it is composed of multiple layers too, right? So it becomes very confusing fast. But if we look at that top layer as a wall of brick, you have these cells that are the bricks, the structure, and then you have the mortar, in between, which holds the cells together, which would be your sebum, what you're producing. It's not actually, it's a very liquid mortar. It's not attached to it,
Right.
but it's part of the skin. So that's the oils and also the salts you produce. These salts you produce because they keep the water in your skin. So there's always 2 elements with the structure, and what it's sitting on top is the water in the oils, kind of like the vinaigrettes, right? The chemistry of our skin, the way it works. The oils will protect the water evaporation, so it will protect against dehydration. But to make sure that you are well hydrated, you also have to have water in that's kept in through the salts. So this is, like the skin itself. And then on top of it, what we didn't know is a microbiome layer, the ecosystem that lives on your skin, multiple microorganisms. And these guys are actually the first protection of the skin. I always compare the skin as a double layer, double armor, because it's the microorganisms on top that sit on the skin and protects it. And then the skin itself protects us, right, against everything, invaders and infections and all the like. So they have like synergetic, like they work together functions, but they're very different at the same time. So hopefully this has made sense.
Of course. Yeah. I like the brick and mortar analogy. I think one thing people like about the podcast is that a lot of the people that come on, they simplify kind of academic terminology into a way that feels relatable to the everyday life. And I think if you ever gone by a construction site or seen anything being built, this makes a lot of sense, right? You see the brick, you see the mortar, you see the connectivity, how things have come together with that. So I love that. In terms of the function, I feel like we never think too much about the function of skin. We just think about the outcome of how the aesthetic of skin. Can you talk a little bit deeper? I know we talked about protection mechanisms from pathogens and things of that nature, but this incredibly large organ, what are some more of the functions that we really need to be paying attention to help us have better skin knowledge and application of taking care of our skin?
Well, that's a very good question. One, I will tell you, I've never been asked. So this is fabulous. So the skin, yes, is our protective organ. We know this. This is the basis, but it does a few things. First of all, protect against invaders. It's the outer layer, right? It's the only organ that we have. Well, there's the eyes as well, partially, but that is exposed to the outside. So it has a dynamic that's a bit different because of that. We'll speak to that later. But it's connected also to all the other organs. So in terms of our temperature, it regulates temperature. that it does that through sweating and constriction. And, so this is a very important organ for that. We know this without knowing it. We never worry about this, right? But this is what the sweating does. It's super important. And sweating does a lot more too, in terms of being healthy. And that's how, again, the skin connects into our overall health. We are exposed to contaminants. Some of them, the skin prevents from getting in. But those contaminants that would get in can actually be excreted through sweat. So it's super important to sweat every day.
That's such a
even
great thing to
through
say, because there's people I always know in my work, like sometimes people are like, oh, I don't like sweating and all that stuff. But that's important to bring up, that sweating is actually important. It's actually a good sign of fitness when you're sweating early. You're getting heat dispersion out of your body for that. But the sweat part, I think we don't take serious enough how important that is. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It gets rid of your, heavy metal contaminants. And honestly, nowadays, there's nobody that's not exposed to
That's
those,
right.
unfortunately. So, whether it's through the sauna or exercise, even better, you can get rid of those heavy metals. I mean, that wasn't the basic function originally, but it does
No,
that too.
I know,
It,
right?
It has great benefits also on the whole cardiovascular system and your local also circulation, which is ultimately great for your skin because it does distribute the nutrients and the cofactors that your skin would need to actually build your collagen that everybody wants to, to make sure that we have a great, good supply. So all of that is again connected. So that's another function, the sweating function, the thermoregulation. Another function is around touch, evidently, then danger, but also emotionally, right? It's connected to our brain, to our sensation, to our need for, closeness. The skin senses that, right? So it's, again, very important to have that organ functioning through the nerves and the nervous system, but very, very important function of the skin. And I use it personally as a mini diagnostic tool. Evidently, it won't see big, tremendous issues like cancer, for instance. But then again, it depends because we'll talk about it later. There are some dangerous cancers that you can actually spot on your skin. So I can do a quick recap after at the end. But it can show you your level of inflammation quite rapidly. The condition of your skin is a mirror to what's going on inside, right? And sometimes, we break out or we have flares and we will, turn to our dermatologist or, the pharmacist and, okay, what can I put on, to get rid of this? But often is, okay, what can I learn from this? What is my skin trying to tell me? And what should I get rid of instead of trying to add something else? Maybe my skin is telling me, okay, there's something off. Maybe in my diet, maybe in the product that I'm using, maybe I'm not moving enough. Maybe, there's all these signs that actually tell us what's going on inside. So,
Amazing.
the,
Yeah.
function of the skin.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, I love the touch aspect of it. I think we take that for granted quite a bit, things like that. Or just something like when you feel a cool breeze on your skin and this kind of alert system, like, hey, you're getting cold, or it's too hot, things of that nature. It pushes you to either put something on or take it off to help warm your body for that. I was curious, I was thinking about what's the relationship of sleep to skin health? I don't think we talk about this enough as well, because you think when you don't sleep well, you kind of look pretty haggard, and your skin that you see kind of this wrinkliness or a rough look to. Tell me a little bit about that if that's something I know this not may not be your area, but it feels like it's all interconnected, you know?
I think you're absolutely right. I think everything is connected. One thing that really, and I'll take a step back to answer this. One thing that really shocked me in a way is it didn't shock me, but it was a big haha moment. I was like, oh my God, worked about 20 years in oncology in different types of projects. This is what really developed my prevention approach, to many things. And for, we share the personal, family health scares.
Mhm.
And so I did a deep dive in oncology. Yes, skin cancer in particular, but also various types of cancer. And then we had all these prevention measures that would decrease the risk of developing a cancer, right? And then exposed to different therapeutic area when I moved into immunology, and then trying to, to see the pathways and understanding at some point that the risk factors for developing dementia or the risk factors for developing cardiovascular issues or the risk factors for developing a cancer and the risk factor for aging or premature aging skin, they're kind of all the same.
Mhm.
And one of them is sleep.
Yeah.
So sleep is super complex. It's a repair function. It has different cycles, circadian. There's also the protein and adenosine that, like depletion and,
Yes.
so there's multiple mechanisms that renders the quality of your sleep optimal. But there's also, these cycles when they're off that it can actually, compromise your sleep and your skin. And I think the major connection into that is hormonal.
Mm.
Yes, there's the repair function and the inflammation. That's for one, but this is usually short-lived if, it doesn't stay constant. But the stress on your immunology system and on the cortisol levels, which increase this stress on your immunologic system, is, I think, what we should watch for anything, including the skin, right?
Yeah.
So I think the sleep is super, super important. It does affect your level of cortisol, and cortisol affects your skin because it does decrease sex hormones, and these sex hormones are fabulous for your skin, whether you're a man or a woman, and obviously different. And there's a different dynamic on the skin too because of these hormones. But whether your biology is masculine or feminine, it does affect your skin directly with a decreased, level of hormonal balance
Yeah.
because of the stress that's caused.
Before we take a step into kind of skin science 3.0 and the whole deal and what you're working on, which is fascinating, I want to take a step back into something in time here a little bit. And I had a recent conversation with a few people, regular conversations about skin. It was just like during random conversations at conferences and stuff. And I remember a few people telling me about, back in the 80s and things like that, that they would use baby baby oil and things like that. This is
Ooh,
crazy,
yeah.
right? I mean, it sounds crazy
Yeah.
now, but what didn't we know then that we know now that has changed a lot of people's idea about using something like that to bronze your skin and how and what do we know so much better about skin that has changed some of our habits? Now, these habits haven't been completely gone away because people are doing things to their skin all the time, whether it's through cosmetic things, whatever. But what has changed in society, you think, about how we view our skin that has changed our habits about how we take care of our skin?
That's a good question. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't think our perspective has changed that much. What we use is very different.
Okay.
In the sense that we are very much into how we look.
Yes.
Fortunately, the health look is becoming very much trendy, thankfully. But the glow of the sun, tan skin was so in at the time that I think that's why people were doing that.
Right.
We hadn't been also, I'm not going to say brainwashed, but almost, around the effects of the sun on the skin, no matter your skin color, right? We know a darker skin is protected from sunburn, but it's not protected from developing mutations, right?
Right.
So we didn't we weren't informed around this at all. But like I guess it's a bit like smoking, like
Mm.
in the 40s and the 50s, we
Yeah.
kind of knew, but we didn't, right? Because people smoked. But then there was a lot of campaigns around smoking, and like basically there's no benefits
Confirm.
of smoking,
Yeah.
like and then like slowly people start, like to switch habits, right? Um I guess it may be similar, like the
Yeah.
sun tanning, if people like see, a benefit to how they look on their glow, on their, aesthetics. But I don't think the tanned skin looks as healthy now as it did.
Yeah.
What is it, 40 years ago
Yeah. It was
already?
a
Yeah.
while ago. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's mainly what it is, and yeah. So oil, what it did really, it worked as a magnifying glass, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, especially we would use like these.
Oh yeah.
I'm such a light skin, I couldn't do that, but he knows the reflectors.
The reflectors.
Put the
It's like a
you know,
frying
on my
yourself.
neck. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, I
Yeah.
forgot about
So
that when you mentioned
yeah.
that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, even when I was on a cruise recently and a lot of people were still laying out and I saw a few people like they just looked red. Like they looked like lobster red. And so it's still that some people don't take it seriously, the damage that happens with their skin. But I think that it's kind of like there's this weird mechanism with skin. It's like we see it all the time. We're looking at ourselves all the time. We whether we like it or not, it's always had this aesthetic component to it. And what I like to do with these type of conversations, like, well, I understand that's always going to be a thing, but educating people of like, there's other things at play here. And maybe that's a good way of leading into the seriousness of looking at what's happening underneath the hood and the future of how we're viewing this, how our skin as we move forward to the future, where are we headed with this, you know?
Yeah. I think there's also this misconception, what I call the hero ingredient, that we've discovered so many things that there will be, like this invention or this ingredient that will, revert the damage,
Mm.
which unfortunately, we haven't been able to do yet. Um, in what I do, I don't believe we can, and
Oh.
we even should. Like, can we revert the damage that's done internally? I haven't seen it in,
Mm.
like where it, like we've studied. There's no reversal. You can stop, you can slow down. The aging process, because all organs age,
That's right.
we can definitely slow that down, but we can reverse the damage. So, like the simplest when it comes to the sun and the skin is just to protect it from, UV rays, right? This
Yeah.
is what it is. It's UV rays. And the irony in that is that we do need
We need it. Yeah.
UV rays to produce vitamin D,
That's
right?
right.
But yeah, but we now live in environments that are so far from, like optimal vitamin production, and especially for darker skin, again, because they're protected against, UVs. They need more. to actually produce a decent amount of vitamin D. So
Yeah.
what happens at the level of the skin, and to come back to your question, is that the UV will attack the DNA. It attacks everything. UV is really, really powerful. It attacks any molecules that, except those that it, is blocking them. And that's why we use sunscreen. What do sunscreen do? First of all, there's two types, right? There's one type that absorbs the UV. So you can imagine what it becomes when you absorb UV. The molecule transforms. So that's why you have to reapply sunscreen, because that molecules became something else. And let me tell you, what it became is not a great molecule for your skin. You want to get rid of that molecule as quickly as possible. But it did protect from the UV attack. You're better off having what you have on your skin being deteriorated than your actual cells, right?
Right.
Which develop mutations. So this is what you're trying to prevent. But before we go into that a bit, the other way of protecting your skin is physically, right? Either through a block of a molecule that blocks the UV and reflects it, like zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, they do that. Or physical clothing. Or, I'm very, very big fan of clothing and hats, even on the beach. Like with a skin like mine, you don't have the choice. That's what it is. But what you're trying to prevent is really the accumulation of these mutations, because mutation arrives from different places. UV, very, very big in carcinogen, but it may be what you eat. It may be, there's different activities that we do that expose us or sensitize us. And one mutation is fine, like your cell will manage it. It has a repair system. It's all good. But through time and through aging, and sometimes it's just a random mutation through replication, because your immunology system is a bit, decreased, because you haven't slept well, because you're stressed, or, and again, it's all related. But all these events occur, and through time, your cell accumulates mutations, and these mutations sometimes become viable for the cell. And what that means, that they are able to grow with this mutation and they replicate. And this is when, it starts to be problematic. Evidently, it takes a sequence. So that's why we see a lot more cancers later in life than earlier. And that's why we see those people, that were exposed with their oil and their reflectors, coming now to the clinic, 30, 40 years later, and they have these skin issues because they've accumulated enough mutations to be, and that's the issue. When you're young, you just worry about the aesthetics of it.
That's right.
And
I
the
was just
long
telling
term,
us, yeah, I was telling some students the other day, I said, the question you have to ask yourself, the question your older self will ask your younger self is, what were you doing? And you never think about that. Let's say when you're in your 20s, you don't think about the person you'll be in your 60s, because that person isn't real to you. That person doesn't exist. It's not even you, according to you. But that person in their 60s, 50s is going to look back and go, what did I do? And so the habits you do now, and that's why this episode's so important in all of them, because it's going to be listened to by a lot of 20-somethings. And
Good.
what you're doing now influences the person you'll become health-wise in the future. These are the same people. They are just one is paying the price for the in the future for the past for that. So you're saying about the reflectors. It's so funny. I just totally forgot about that when you mentioned it. And not only is just like you're frying yourself in an oven, but it's damaging your skin, and you see a lot of really deteriorated skin over time. And then the accumulation, the mutation, what's happening underneath and then happens, that becomes a really serious issue too, not just the aesthetic, obviously, but when it becomes this pathophysiology that becomes serious at that point, you know.
Exactly. And you know, some of them are really more aesthetics than other. You know, some are super life threatening. So
Right.
very important. But even those that end up not being too life threatening, they're really, you know, aesthetically worse than, you know, like what you were trying to achieve. You know, like, and I see, like, not only for the sun, but even for um interventions. You know, people use all sorts of, you know, like, guess, you know, to have better skin.
Yeah.
They'll do, like, you know, peelings, and you know, we're not
Let's
going to get into that,
right.
but the skin through those, you know, like, short term, my God, what a glow.
Yeah.
But the long term effect of those, you know, it's done being studied because nobody, you know, wants to study this, right? I'm going to have a device, or I'm going to have this product. I'm going to do this. Of course, I wanted to show you short term what it's going to look like. But I have met lots of people, you know, like, oh, I did this, that, and that. And now my skin is sensitized. I can't use
Yeah.
anything. It's, you know, reacting to everything. It's very fine. And, you know, like that they know, right? But it's too late, unfortunately. So it's
Yeah.
fabulous that people can listen to that earlier. And what I loved, Dr. Darian, about what you just mentioned, is that, yeah, and you think someone is so different at 60,
Mm.
but when you're going to be 60, you feel as if you're still 18. Like
That's
you're
right.
the same person. You
That's
feel, you know,
right.
like what happened, you know, like you
Yeah.
just see the difference in the mirror. That's for sure.
That's
That's
it. Yeah, you see the
clear
difference, but you
the
feel like you're that same person. But then
because you,
psychologically, you start thinking, what was that? I'm that person. What was I doing at that time? And I see the influence of that time outwardly in my skin, especially your skin, because that's what you see. You don't see your heart. You don't see your lungs. You're not seeing your kidneys. For most people, that's irrelevant until it becomes relevant disease wise and they get a diagnosis. So you put it off. Your skin you can't put off because it's always in front of you with their mirror and your phone or whatever. So it's you would think the behavioral aspect would be much greater because it's something you see all the time. But we still treat skin like it's an internal organ and we don't see it in many ways still.
yeah, you're right. But at the same time, I feel it bears, and that's certainly why I got into it a lot, because as a teen, I had issues and all I
Mm.
wanted was the short term results. You know, like I really, you know, like you want to get rid of your acne. And then so you
Yes.
use products that are super irritating. So you end up having red skin no matter what, you know, like either you're breaking, no, or you're irritated, you know, like there's no
Yeah.
in there,
Yeah.
you know, like, but you don't know. But a good question around what you're saying is that, you know, like, what would I say to my younger self? You know, like if I could, and I would say, listen to your body, listen to your skin. It tells you so many things. Listen to your guts. Again, you know, it tells you
It
many, many
does.
things. And if you do listen, you're not going to go, you know, like extreme, you know, like you're going to care of yourself. And, you know, the race is long kind of thing. We
Yeah.
think, you know, like the young years are, you know, like, but yeah, we're going to thank ourselves later. But, you
Most
know,
definitely. Well, let's switch into the work that you're doing. And I just love that you talked about being a chemist. And offline, we were talking about just a little bit about the Skin 3.0 and just your current work. Let's talk about that, how it relates to this current conversation and where you're headed with this.
yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've always followed kind of my one passion and curiosity. And this was very much connected to what happened in my life, right? So I have skin issues. I'm trying to understand what's going on, right? And I did biochemistry. You know, I had that interest, obviously, for the human body. And events brought me into oncology. Other events brought me into immunology, and putting all of that together, because I worked across so many disease states, I came to see the the biochemical cascade and the inflammation implications of those, and how, like, the body works as a whole and how it's connected. And in immunology, I fell into the skin microbiota. So we talked about it. People know it's microorganisms, but most people know about the gut microbiota, right? And this is what we were discovering mostly at the time, what the gut microbiota can do for you, the benefits, and how to support it. And because I was so passionate about the skin, obviously, I, like, looked onto the skin microbiota, and the computer capabilities were allowing us to discover tons of things, super interesting. And I realized that, this is what was missing to build a system that made sense for the skin, to support the skin. And because I had wanted, when I finished my PhD and when I started working, like, to develop something that made sense for the skin, but I felt something was missing. But when I dived into the skin microbiota, I realized, okay, this is something we had not cared for and that we should really pay attention to. So we talked about the trend. I know there was a big trend on the microbiota for a while. I don't think it's a trend at all. I think it's an element that's part of the skin, and that's the 3.0, like, that's the top layer. So if we come back to that, my daughter at the time was becoming a teenager, going through the same issues I had gone through, opening my cabinet, tons of products in there, like, and trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? What do I do? And I was like, oh no, we're not going through this again, because it's symptoms based. It doesn't make sense. Like, it tries to short term get rid of one thing, but it compromises the whole system, right?
Yeah.
But nobody had thought about this really, like, like, in that perspective. And certainly, like, as a biochemist, I was still influenced by, like, the industry and how it works. And, so it wasn't working out until I mapped kind of everything. Okay, the basic of the skin works on water and oil. We talked about these two type of mortar elements that are the salts and the oils that work together, like, to allow these reactions, the biochemical reaction of the skin, to occur properly. And then there's, on top of it, microorganisms. So what do they do? How do they work with the whole? Well, one, they feed on the oils, mainly, that are produced by the skin, and the debris, the proteins, like, what's on top. But what they do mainly is two things. One, they kind of filter a bit UV light. We know this. So it's not a sunscreen, like, you're going to get a sunburn if you just go, oh, yes, I have a good solid skin microbiota. But it does, like, on a day-to-day help, like, as a light filter. The other thing they do is that by being super diverse, the more you have microorganisms, and on the skin, we're talking about, yes, bacteria, we're talking about viruses, we're talking about yeasts, and even mites, tiny mites that everybody has on their skin. And, like, it's all of that. It's a cocktail. And usually, when there's a lot of them, because the more the better, they work together fine, and they cohabit super well. The issues come when you don't have enough. Because if you don't have enough microorganisms, there's one that take over. There's disbalances. For instance, for acne, the bacteria that's causing acne, when it's left alone because it hides in the pores and you overcleanse everything else, but you can't reach those, well, then they flare up because they have, like, they don't have control or limits because the others are not around, right? So this is very, very much counterintuitive, because most people have been taught, well, you have acne-prone skin, you better double cleanse or even exfoliate or do this and that and that, where actually what you're doing is stripping your skin not only of its oils and salts, but also of your microbiota. It actually protects you against,
Interesting.
these flares. So it does that for acne. There's other variable, but that's one of them. It does that for dermatitis. So eczema is very, very much related to the quality of your microbiota, locally, your skin microbiota. There's other conditions that it's, by just by the mechanism that it's related to actually your gut microbiota. So, like all of this is things that we have to put in perspective. So when I get in front of my mirror, evidently, I don't want to be thinking about all of this, because it is a complex system.
Yeah.
And I wanted to help my daughter, but at the same time, I had looked for a system that worked for me too. And I really believe in the one human skin, that your skin, my skin, everyone's skin is basically the same, as we have the same heart, the same lungs, it works the same. The only thing is that we have different metabolisms. Sometimes we are more stressed or lack of sleep, like we mentioned.
Right.
So all of these influence what the skin produces. So sometimes it produces more oils, sometimes less. And the salts, try to adapt, but they get stripped by the frequent washing. And we use ingredients that disturb the microbiota, and then we wash them off. And, in order to support the skin, I decided, okay, every ingredient that the skin produces, I'm going to give back. I'm going to restore, the essential to my skin. And I'm going to feed on top of it the microbiota so that it has everything it needs to thrive, right? So it ended up being 35 ingredients working, together, and to make it work all the time, because the skin, because of your metabolism that changes constantly, well, the skin needs change constantly, because sometimes, like for women, for instance, if you still have your cycle, well, sometimes your skin, just with your cycle, sometimes your skin produces more oil, sometimes less. And, hydration levels and all of this, just with your sex hormones. So then, there's the stress, there's the sleep, there's what you ate, there's if you trained or not, if you sweat or not, right?
Right.
If you live in a dry environment, or if you travel, or if you, all of these influence what your skin needs. And then we have these products that we can't adapt to that can't adapt to that. So there's a big disconnect, right? And for me to make that shift to, okay, like let's forget about these different symptoms and what we learned through like the past, honestly, 50 years. Because before that, I think we cared better for our skin than we do now. That's something else.
You say.
And I decided, okay, let's give it back. So these 35 ingredients, I've actually separated, and I'm not sure if you're video mostly, but
Yeah.
I separated into two containers, like a bottle and a tube, minimizing plastic always, because plastic ends up in our environment, which end up in us, which are not great. Like that's another topic. So, so these two you can adapt. You use them together. You just need to put a bit, like very minimally. So that's, like the 35 ingredients working together. You put just a bit in your hand, and then you're gonna balance with the salts, the minerals, and that's it. You have the two in your hand. You mix them up, and then you apply. Yeah. So that's it. That's all you have to do. And by listening to your skin, okay, oh, my skin today is oilier. For some reason, I'm going to increase that proportion of that. So I'm going to put more of these minerals and salts. Oh no, my skin is kind of drier and tight. I'm going to put more oils, which are exclusively in the tube, right? So you can balance uh, every day. And yeah, so that's what it does. It simplifies your routine because literally it takes like 10 seconds. You know, like the longest is really applying it if you want to take, like your time to give it a little massage and then, like that's
Sure.
it, like,
Yeah.
but you don't have to worry about, okay, is my skin missing something? And, because for me, that was a big, big headache. I want it to be simple, but I was always wondering, okay, is my skin missing something? Why is it reacting like that? And like, and really focused on the symptom instead of listening. Okay, how does it feel? What is it trying to tell me? And if I'm breaking out, like, okay, well, it means I need a bit more salt because usually when you break out, you're also oilier, right? And then you balance like that, and knowing that both have ingredients to feed and to balance the skin in terms of its pH, which is super important for its chemistry and the microbiota. I know it's a lot of information.
Oh, it's great. Well, I think the
But
microbiome
yes.
part is not discussed in terms of skincare, skin health. I until I met you, I'd never heard of that. Most of the discussion had always been on the gut microbiome, which there's a lot of discussion on that now. Certainly, I've done episodes on that. But in terms of skin health, never had that discussion before. So I think it's going to feel very new to a lot of people about, I mean, you're talking about bacteria and different organisms on skin and saying we need more of that, more diversity of these things. And I think intuitively you hear something like that and you think, do I really need all that? I'm like, wow, that sounds harmful. But we know in the microbiome that it's, I mean, it's trillions of bacteria and that are changing constantly and turning on and off, and that this actually makes sense when you look at your skin, that we're feeding the system, this organ. What are you feeding your skin? This feels like can be very relatable. And
Yeah.
what are you not feeding your skin for that? And are you paying attention to your skin when you look at it, not just for the aesthetic aspect of it, but for, does this feel healthy? Does this feel like we have a good balance here? And that I don't think is happening as much, but I think is trying to happen more. Per what you were saying, that the healthier look is more in vogue now. I hope we continue to go in that direction. We don't need any more visors, anything like that. We don't need any self baking.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's very confusing right now.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is what, like where my passion lies mostly, like on resolving, those puzzles, that confusion, like can we make something simple?
Simple.
How is that become that the skincare is more complicated than feeding yourself, your diet? Like it doesn't make sense. Like this is an organ. You should focus on your plate. Like do you have everything you need on your plate? Because honestly, like if you're asking me, and I'm passionate about the skin and the skin microbiota, this is my stuff. But if you ask me, should I prioritize my skin or my gut? Of course, you prioritize your gut because it's this overall
Yeah.
immune system that's held by that. And it does influence your skin. But
Yes.
your skin microbiota, if you want healthy skin, that's the easiest, to understand this. This is such a low-hanging fruit to a different type of routine that's going to bring back that skin health look, like that everybody wants ultimately, right? And it's so counterintuitive to what we've been told for the past 50 years. I have a, like personal story. My mom used to tell me as a teen, like, and, as a teenager, you don't really listen to your parents. But anyway, and she was telling me, I don't understand why you have, like these skin issues because we didn't have that in my days, like she skipped a generation. She had me quite late for the time. She was born in the 30s, right? You can make the calculations later. But she was born in the 30s. And on a farm. No acne, no dermatitis, like at the time. And I was like, yeah, right, mom, you didn't have acne. You didn't have, yeah, sure. But when I deep dived into the skin microbiota and these studies and, looking at populations that live, like in rural zone in the Amazon where they don't have contact with the external, or those that live in, industrial cities. And the more you're industrialized, well, the more the dermatitis, the acne, the skin issues pop up, like, because it is related, I do believe, to how we care and we asepticize our environment. And it's very, very counterintuitive, again, to what we've been told, to wash and overwash. And, like, oh, if you want to get rid of your acne, like, you got to cleanse and cleanse and cleanse. It's super counterintuitive. And again, when we've been told during COVID, because, oh, you got to sanitize your hands, you're going to wash and wash and wash. The reason is your hands are vectors to, transmission of
Of
disease.
course.
But your skin, your facial skin is not, right? It's not by, a cheek contact that you're going to, like, propagate, like, it's going to take a really long while to do. So you don't need to worry about that. So for your hands, you're right. It's kind of a lost battle to start, caring for microbiota on your hands. You're going to need to wash and overwash to, get rid of these potential infections. But on your skin, the more the better. And it's been shown for multiple conditions that if you grow a solid microbiota, it really decreases the flares. Some, like we discussed, are multifactorial, like acne. Some are very related to your skin microbiota, like dermatitis. And some are completely not related, like psoriasis. Psoriasis, you may improve the quality of your skin, but you're going to have to work on your gut. Unfortunately, this is a genetic disorder that comes from within, right? So, but understanding the, like these dynamics actually, for me, brought me a lot of peace of mind, because, like, it's so confusing. You can find out there any theory you want,
Yeah.
pro, con, like, you read on vitamin C and collagen. And this, like, guys, put the vitamin C in your plate, eat with red pepper, like, it's going to do wonders for your collagen, because this is what you need. You need a, like, a regular supply of vitamin C to produce yourself the collagen. And the collagen, I mean, it's a good protein, but
Yeah.
it's a protein that you have to build yourself. So make sure that you have the right protein source, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
think it's always, no matter how many of these I do, it always comes down to the same thing. It's putting the effort in, doing the work. And I think this is a very human thing. What I'm going to say is we avoid that all the time. It's like, well, if I can get this in a really simple, easy way, why would I just put all the effort in looking at the type of foods I'm eating, how much I'm exercising, how much I'm sleeping? These things take effort. We're very effort averse. And it sounds like it's the same thing for this too. It's like, oh, collagen, look at your plate. No, I'd rather just you give me something external for that. It's a very human issue to not want to do the basic stuff. The basics are
Yeah.
amazing. They're amazing, but they're also not glamorous. They're not great aesthetically out in the public to other people. You're like, oh man, I'm eating well, exercising regularly. They're like, okay, anyways, what is that product you're using? Like, that's the exciting thing you're showing me. It's this constant battle with people about the monotony, unglamorous nature of the basics versus the excitement of the shining lights of the things out there that you can take and get.
Absolutely. And the short-term focus,
The short-term
right?
focus. Yes.
Because the efforts people will put in a 10-step routine, which for me is, one, confusing, two, expensive, and three, takes a lot of time, right? So it is efforts. People are putting a lot of efforts in there.
Mhm.
But because they don't know what type of efforts to put, they try everything,
Try
right?
everything. Yeah.
Like I call that the chase loop, like you try something, like it doesn't work, you try something else, and you start over and then your cabinet fills up because, like you're focused on all these symptoms and layered, you know, conservative like agents, like for all these products. That's what you
Yeah.
do too, right? There
That's
are
right.
in formulations ingredients that are not there for your skin, they're there for the product, right?
That's
So the
right.
more product you layer, the more of those you put on your skin, right? Which are not great ingredients.
Mhm.
No matter if they're natural or not, or like
Yeah.
this is the like the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, like this was, like this whole complication. Okay, can I have one system that works? I don't need to worry about that. And now I'm doing the same with the other system, like my sleep. How can I do, like, I have a routine that's as effortless as possible,
Right.
given that I've done the proper research and I've connected, like, and we are human. We want to enjoy ourselves. We
Of
want to,
course.
like, how do we do this, but still maintain, like our health? And
Yeah.
I really believe it's possible. And I'll let you know when my book is out.
I love that. Okay. Great. Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Mimi, we're out of time, but man, this was wonderful. I thought it would be, and it definitely was. Can you let everyone know how they can connect more with your work and obviously your book that's coming out and anything else?
Yes, absolutely. So for now, well, on LinkedIn, for anyone professional that wants to, partner, I'm Mireille Vega on LinkedIn. You're gonna have to spell that. Just- Most people can't find me otherwise, but I can provide the link. And if you want to, just to be put on our newsletter, so we can let you know, when our products or the book is out, and we also send educational material is drmimi.ca/one human skin. That's where you'll find the place to register to the newsletter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It was very informative and awesome. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Darian. Loved every minute.
Thank you.